Hello, welcome to our first vlog on this little lady, Suzuki's SV650X. Now, this is essentially a winter long termer, loaded up by Suzuki, and we are going to spend some good time with it. We're going to do some bits and pieces to it. We are going to review it, and then we might end up doing something a little bit special with it, but we have to talk Suzuki into it first, so let's just wait on that one. But first of all, why an SV650? Well, it's quite simple really. I haven't got to spend a huge amount of time on bikes like the SV. I quite often do tests on big bikes, and if I have a long-term bike, it's usually a big bike, as well. But I decided that it was about time I spent some time with a little thing like this. Now, I don't usually tend to, and there is a reason for that, and that's because everyone says you don't need 200 horsepower on the road, and while I can see their point, I always think that the great thing about having 200 horsepower and a 180 mile/hour motorcycle is that you respect it. When you've got a motorcycle like the SV that makes a claim 75 horsepower, and if you're an experienced rider, you don't tend to respect it, not very much. You just tend to be full gas absolutely everywhere. And in fact, the first time when I picked this up, I dropped off a Suzuki GSX S1000 to Suzuki. I got this and I laughed all the way home because the throttle was completely pinned and it was just brilliant. Now, this little SV650X was new for last year, and it's essentially a cafe racer type version of the SV, and that's absolutely fine. It's a conservative cafe racer style, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think that's absolutely fine. Now, this bike costs £6,199, and I'm pretty sure the standard SV is about £5,699 or £5,799. So what extra do you get for your money? Well, the first thing you get is this seat here, that seat there, which that is usually an aftermarket accessory. It's 5mm higher, and it's a little bit more comfortable, and it's got a bit more style to it. So there's some of the costs, and obviously you've got the little cowl here, you know, not just a few other bits and pieces. Some of you may also ask, but the SV's getting on a bit, isn't it? And you know, you'd be right, because the SV has been around for exactly 20 years now, which is a long old time. But it's one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And yes, it might not, when you read group tests or watch group tests, it might not quite come up to, say, the performances of Yamaha's new MT-07, you know, the new generation, the new breed. But what I like about this bike is the engine. Now, we might have seen this engine for the first time 20 odd years ago, and yes, it's had some updates and stuff. It's dual spark, and it's got the low down RPM assist and all that kind of stuff. But what I really like about this engine is partly to do with its age, because it's actually really thumpy down below. There's a real, when you whack the throttle open, it's got a nice wop, 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 wop. And the modern twins, again like the MT-07 and stuff, they're a lot more free flowing. They're kind of revvy. They're great, they're brilliant. They don't have that wop, 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 wop. And it was the same with the larger bikes, you know, like the big Panigalis. They all went revvy, 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 and that age-old low down grunt, that disappeared. And that's what I really like about this. I mean, this is thumpy enough. This is actually thumpy enough that it will quite easily wheelie off the throttle in first gear, which, to be honest, I didn't quite expect, but it does. And I would say that's really quite impressive for such a little thing. Now, Suzuki claim, I think it's 75 to 80 horsepower. I'll double check, I'll try and put it on the screen. But I have actually had it on the dyno, because I always like to have a good starting place. What we'll do is I'll show that in episode 2. One more thing about the engine as well, which is not important to me, it's never really been important to me, but I know it's important to a lot of other people, is the fuel economy is excellent. I mean, I've had this bike a couple of weeks, about 10 days before Christmas, and I've had it a couple of weeks on 300 or 400 miles, and I've just been rinsing it everywhere because I can't help myself. It's funny because you just end up going as fast as you do on bigger bikes, but it doesn't feel as fast, and that is dangerous. Trust me, I'd lose my license far quicker on this than I would on a big machine. But even though I've been rinsing it, it's still been doing 47 miles to the gallon, which that's really, really good. I mean, I think they're claiming quite high high figures if this is ridden not like a Prat. But anyway, we'll see how that goes on with time. The seating position is interesting. You would think with bars like this that there'd be a lot of weight on them, but there just isn't. This seat, as I said, 5mm higher than the standard SV seat, but you still sit quite low in the bike, and your hands they rest on the bars, and your elbows kind of droop a little bit, which is great. It makes it really comfortable. But because the bike's so light, that lack of weight on the front end, for want of a better expression, that doesn't really matter. But things like handling we'll get into at a later date. I'm not going to get nitpicky now. This is just the first impressions, how I'm getting on with it. Brakes, even though the brakes use essentially old school calipers type stuff, as you can see there, the kind of push calipers, they're fine. They're fine. They're absolutely fine. I would like a little bit more from it, but that's something to look at a later date. But they're perfectly usable. They've been perfectly strong enough. The ABS has been really good, especially in this crappy weather, slippery roads. It hasn't really kicked in very much. One thing I do like about the bike though is the dash. It is actually the same dash that's on the GSX SV650X, and that's kind of good for, it's not colour, but it's not colour, but it's good enough. Now tyres wise, these come on Dunlop Road Smart 3s, but any experienced bikers out there, you'll know that when it comes to OE tyres, it may say Dunlop Road Smart 3, but they won't, the chances of them being exactly what they are as you would buy from a dealer are virtually nil. It's just always the way with that kind of thing. But they've actually been quite good. The only thing I don't like about them so far is the way the front tracks imperfections in the road. It's actually quite marked. Sometimes how you're riding down and there's like been some roadworks or something, and you can feel the front kind of doing that a little bit. The tyres bump management, or track management, sorry, isn't quite as good as some other Dunlops I've tried, or other tyres. So I'll look at some other tyres at some point, but for the moment they've been gripping just fine, and it's properly greasy and crappy and shitey at the moment, so that's good. But now, as you can probably see in the background here, I'm at SP Engineering, and the reason's quite simple. The bike sounds okay when you're on it, but what I'd really like is a little bit more noise, because noise saves lives. It's true. I don't just want this to sound lovely because it's a twin. I want someone ahead of me who's about to do a U-turn to know I'm coming if I'm going down traffic or for whatever reason. And once, actually in London once, a guy almost pulled out on me, a taxi driver, and he actually rolled down his window and said, "Mate, if I hadn't heard you coming, I'd have spun round and I'd have been toast." So I've always advocated having a loud bike, not obsessively loud, not obscenely loud, but just something nice. Now these guys here, SP Engineering, I've done quite a bit of stuff for them before. They're local, they're the local shop for local people to me. So these guys are my first call. I did speak to Suzuki about, they have a Yoshimura exhaust for this, which is an official accessory, but they're out of stock at the moment. But you know what, that's absolutely fine, because these guys can do a really good job for me too. So we'll go and meet Dave in a minute. Speaking of accessories, what I'm going to do, so this is just an introduction episode, then episode 2 I will start looking more at the bike, a bit more review of the bike, and then we will look at some other Suzuki official accessories that I have put on order. I'm getting some extra lights for the front. They do like some fog lamps with a bit of extra illumination, because I'm always of the opinion that we're getting more power, great, we're getting more electronics, great, handling gets better, everything gets better, but the lights on most bikes at night are shite, even really good ones. So anyway, let's move on from that at the moment. Let's go see what Dave's got to say. Hi Dave.
Hi.
Hello mate.
Hello.
What? Come on then, I've got a little Suzuki outside. You have, well, I'm going to say one thing. You have many cans here, but you don't have as many as you used to have. What's going on?
No, we've only put out on display a small range due to the space that we've got. Mm-hmm. There are a lot more options, but in terms of the Suzuki, I've got a few ideas.
Yeah.
So firstly,
give me 3 options.
I was thinking Carbon Diablos with the new carbon tip, giving it a modern twist. Mm-hmm. We've got a retro style, if you want to give it a more retro look. This
isn't it? That is quite retro style. Well, it is a retro-y type, cafe racery type bike.
That's one of my thoughts.
Okay. What's that called, that one?
That one's called the Dome GP.
So we've got the Diabolus,
Yep.
the Dome GP, and then...
And potentially the Big Bore, because again it's got that more rounded traditional edge, more older styling.
Gotcha. Now let's have a little look. See, my eyes are immediately drawn to two others here.
Okay, you tell me what you think.
Well, I've actually had one of those on a bike before, haven't I?
Yeah, very similar to that.
Yeah, very similar. This one,
Yep.
because it's got that kind of modern look with the grate.
Yep, that's the titanium HCR.
And I like this one. Now, can I just... these would fit as well?
Yes, they would, yeah. Yeah.
Dave.
I mean, this is one of our new designs, and you're quite right in that with the styling of the end being quite flat and neutral, it would suit really well. But, you know, we're happy to assist, and if you think, you know, that one's the right one for the bike, then not a problem at all.
Okay, well, let's just think. What do you guys think? Which one should I go for? Any preference? If you haven't got any preference, then I'll just choose one. But literally, the world is the oyster here. We've got so many to choose from. And then I imagine at some point, Dave, you're going to try and...
We are definitely going to have to consider some of the Barracuda products. In particular, I think this one lends itself to a cafe racer really well, which is a classic grip.
Oh yeah.
So it's got the diamond cut style rubber there, which I think really shouts retro.
Well,
Yeah.
getting a bit ahead of myself there.
Yep.
This will be some way down the line, to be
Yeah,
fair.
sure.
At first, what we need to do is make it sound less like a sewing machine.
I think we can help there.
Do you know what? I think you can. So I reckon for episode 3, come back,
Okay.
choose a can,
Yep.
go from there.
Yep. Sounds good.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Okay, so for this, the inaugural episode, that's about it. As I said, I don't want to go into too much stuff at the moment. We'll get deep into the review of just the bike itself in upcoming episodes. We'll look at other bits and bobs. Well, I've come here now. Yeah, if you do have any preference on which one of Dave's cans I'm going to put on here to replace this, which I think is out of keeping with the otherwise... I like the aesthetic, as I said before, I like it. Let us know, otherwise I'll just choose one and we'll go with that. And I like the SP guys, the cans are cheap, they usually make power. Pretty much everything I've ever used them on has made power, but we'll get properly into the deep and meaningful. And it's been a while, to be fair, it's been a while since I've done this, so I've probably just blabbed a load of crap. But anyway, we'll get on with episode 2, and then do keep in touch, because if our plans for this come to fruition, but as I said, we'll get to that later. So see you in episode 2.